Last week in the gospel, we heard Jesus talking about the Pharisees. And Jesus told us that we should do what the Pharisees say, but not do what the Pharisees do. And he also called out on the Pharisees because they were always looking for new ways to be seen before other people. And lastly, last Sunday, Jesus finished the gospel saying that those who are exalted will be humbled, but those who humble themselves will be exalted. In this present Sunday, Jesus is no longer talking about the Pharisees, but Jesus will come up with a parable again. A parable where we will see 10 virgins. 5 of them foolish, 5 of them wise. So when you come to think about these 10 virgins, they were very similar in almost everything. They were virgins, they knew the bride, they were bridesmaids, they had their lamp, but there was only one thing that made 5 of them different from the other 5. 5 had oil, the other 5 had their lamp, but no oil. So the question I want to address today is, why did 5 of them have oil and 5 of them didn't have oil or spare oil? And the answer is very simple. Because 5 of them understood that the wait could be long. The other foolish 5 thought that the wait would be short. But the wise understood that the wait could be long. So today in this homily, I want to share with you why I think it's also important for your life and for mine to see things in the long run, to understand that things can take a while, to understand that it's better always to look things from the point of view of the drone and not from the point of view of the GoPro that you take in your forehead. So today, I repeat, I want to share with you examples of how it is so important for you and for me, like the wise virgins, to understand that the time that we wait for things to happen has to be a long time. Let's start with an example for young parents who have young kids. I think that when we have a narrow vision of things, when we are not able to elevate ourselves from the perspective of a drone, in many cases when we have small kids, we may lose our patience and we may lose our peace. Maybe small kids are misbehaving during Mass. Maybe small kids are misbehaving during the week. And when we have a narrow view, we feel tempted to lose our peace and to say these kids are never going to change. But I think that parents, if you have the perspective of the wise virgins, today you're going to be reminded that it is important to see things in the perspective of the long run. And when you feel tempted to lose your patience and to lose peace with your kids, you have to remind yourselves, in the future, there's going to be a day when this house is going to be empty. And all of the kids that right now bring life to the house are going to be gone. And that day, when all of the kids are going to be gone, you're going to say, oh, those days were good days. Oh, those days, this house was full of life. So I think that parents, for example, if they saw things in the long run, today, they would be less prompted to lose their patience with their kids, to lose their peace. If they understood that the wait is long, like the wise virgins, then parents could be more patient with their kids, knowing that in the future, the nest is going to be empty and they're going to look with nostalgia to the past. Let me give you a different example. This example is not for parents. This example is for all of us. It could be the case that we struggle with a particular sin. It could be a case that we feel disencouraged and disappointed with ourselves when we go over and over again to confession for the same sin. And maybe we've been struggling with this sin for years or for months or for decades. And when we see things in a narrow perspective, when we think that the wait is going to be short like the foolish virgins, we feel discouraged with ourselves. And sometimes we say, what's the point of trying if I always fall in the same sin? What's the point of trying if this sin appears to be stronger than me? But what if we understood that we should see things from the long run and understanding that the wait is long? Then you would be able to see that even when you're still struggling with the same sin, if you're perseverant in your trial, if you go to confession frequently, if you do your best not to fall into that sin, although you may be still struggling, you will notice that you will acquire the virtue of humility because you go to confession. You will notice that you acquire the virtue of perseverance because you keep trying. You will notice that you will acquire the virtue of patience because you don't feel discouraged even though you fail. So for all of us, fellow sinners, who fall over and over again into the same sin, the parable today reminds us that it is extremely wise to see things in the long run, not to lose our peace. I want to give you one last example. And this example comes from my own life. I remember that many years ago, the year was 2007, I was preparing to go into the seminary. And I had already told my parents about my decision. And for a whole year, we had a very hard time in my house. My parents very much opposed my decision, and they did everything that was in their hands to try to convince me not to take the next step into going into seminary. And I remember that I had really hard times where I felt disencouraged. And I remember that there was a priest who I went for confession, and he always told me the same thing. You know what he told me? He said, you have to look at things in the long run. Right now, your parents don't understand what you're doing. But in the future, your parents will be grateful for the decision you took. And guess what? 11 years later, the year was 2018, I got ordained. And that day, my mother told me, finally, I understand why it was important for you to take this decision. So if I looked at things in the short run, like the foolish virgins, I might have lost my peace and be disencouraged. But because a priest told me, always look things in the long run, like the wise virgins, I was able to persevere. And I've decided I want to take the same perspective when it comes to weather. Because when you see things in the short run, what can you see? December, January, February, March. You get depressed. But when you see things in the long run, you can see again June, July, August. So I wanna thank people because they've been concerned about me. And in these past weeks, I have received gloves, a pair of long johns, and this is a true story. After Mass, I received a drawing. A little kid did a drawing for me, and I said, thank you. And I asked, I couldn't understand what the drawing was, so I asked, what is this drawing? And the little girl said, it's the State Fair. And I said, oh, the State Fair. And she said, yes, so you can remind yourself that August is coming in the future. So this little kid she was able to see things in the long run like the wise virgins. So let me finish this homily with this question that I think is very important. Right now in your life, what is taking away your peace? What is really making you lose your peace in this moment of your life? Maybe it's a financial concern. Maybe it's a situation in your household. Maybe it's a sin that you're struggling with. Today, if you're losing your peace, I want to encourage you. Let's see things in the long run, in the same way as the wise virgins. And I can guarantee you, if you look at things with the wisdom of the wise virgins, you will be able to recover your peace and see things straight and prudently.